Hi, my name is Ben Brown. I'm an MBA candidate here at USC's Marshall School of Business. I want to thank you guys very much for coming out here. It's really meant a lot to me and the rest of the USC family here in the crowd. I also had the pleasure of serving with Teach for America for the past 3 years. My question is for you, Dr. Canada. This is a question that is echoed from one of my first graders, Isabella. She asked me, Mr. B, what happens after I go to college? I would like to know what happens to the students who are put through this pipeline once they graduate college, because it's hard enough for a lot of the USC undergrads to get jobs. You hear about so many people who have to move back home with their families.
Yep.
Well, when these kids move back home to inner city Harlem,
Yep.
what goes on?
I mean, this is something that Stan and I and the board, we're really concerned about. Obviously, the macro forces around employment and unemployment impact our kids disproportionately. I think that no one guarantees you that you're going to be a success in America. We only say that we're going to try and give everybody the tools so they can compete equally. And I think that's what we're trying to do. And do I wish that the sort of labor market was stronger right now so my kids would be more readily be absorbed? Absolutely. Are we preparing them to compete fiercely for jobs? Yes, we are. Can we guarantee they're going to get them? We can no more guarantee that than I think anyone can guarantee they're going to get a job. We are thinking about how we connect them to internships and other things that sort of helps them learn the codes, right, that'll allow them to be viewed as more employable. But I think that one of the reasons that we're so concerned about things like the investments that Stan was talking about at NIH and other things is that the growth that has to happen in this country, we've been pretty good at stimulating that growth with a formula right now that has public and private investments sort of paying off, and a lot of time the public underwrites what the private sector is going to do in creating jobs, and we think that that has to continue. So, can I guarantee they're going to get jobs? No. Is it going to be hard on lots of kids who go through college and then are not going to have to pay the college loans? And yes, it will be. Do I think there's a plan B? There is no plan B, right?
Hi, so my question is also for Geoffrey Canada, and my question lies in the Promise Neighborhood initiative across the country. Do you realistically think it's going to be possible to replicate your success? And if so, what are the things that all these Promise Neighborhood initiatives can't forget to do?
Yeah. So, one of the things that I really insisted to the White House around Promise Neighborhoods was that it would require a match from the private sector. I did not think that the government putting up all of the money would make these successful, because a funny thing happens when the government spends money. People just say everything's working, right? You're not going to run for re-election and say, oh yeah, I messed up and this didn't work, right? And so in the end, I think the only way to hold folk accountable is folks invest money from the private sector, because they actually want to see their money do well. So one of the real challenges, I think, is this issue of accountability and holding people accountable. Right now, there are 10 places that have been at this for a year. I would say a third of them are actually doing a pretty good job. And for lots of reasons, I won't name them, but they actually have things on the ground. They're building their pipelines. They look good. About a third, we can't say how they're going to turn out, some hope or some challenges, and about a third are really struggling. I think that, it's early. It's only been a year. This thing takes time. But I think it shows real promise. What I think about Promise Neighborhoods, I think it's like the work we do is like running an emergency room, right? And you've got to have an emergency room. So people wonder, do you have to? Yeah, you have to have an emergency room, even if it's lousy, right? If your city doesn't have one, they really think you can't run a major city without an emergency room. Getting a great emergency room is a tough thing to do. I don't care what city you're in. People know where the really good places are if you're in real trouble. And so we think that's where we are with the Promise Neighborhood strategy. It is the emergency room for communities that are dying, right? It's the place. Are all of them going to be good? No. Are you going to get some good ones? Yes. The ones that are lousy, should we have them be better? The answer is yes, because in the end, we don't know what else you're going to be able to do in these kind of communities. So I think there's a lot of promise out there right now that's happening, and then there's some places that we should be concerned about.
My name is Nick Lingenfelter. I'm a full-time MBA student, 2013. First and foremost, thanks to the three of you for your service to academia, the society, and to the economy as a whole. I greatly appreciate it. I'm a 13-year veteran of the United States Navy. My question to you guys is, short of hiring some evil empire to launch another Sputnik, what advice would you prescribe for me to convince my peers to go long on education?
Because there's a lot of, reporting that it is an MBA or postgraduate degree is it worth the $100,000, right? Is that part of the question?
Not even specifically for postgraduate or even undergraduate education, but just in terms of our children in the long term. Ultimately, post-Cold War, we saw the need to invest heavily in math and science, and we did that, and we're seeing the benefits of that in my parents' generation at this point. How do I convince my current generation and my peers to do the same thing to achieve the same benefits in the long run?
Stan, thoughts?
I don't know why I'm qualified to answer this because we're talking about communication skills within their generation, but I would just point out to the competitive challenges going on with China, India, Brazil, all around the world. And when you combine that with the fiscal gap, we're in tough shape. And if you look at where money is being made today and the way societies are going, intellectual content is going to be much more important than it was 30 or 40 years ago. So it's easy to argue that I would say that education is not only as pertinent as it was back then, it's much more pertinent because we're in a knowledge and we're in a service economy, which obviously favors intellect and knowledge over physical skills.
And the only thing I would say on this is, I think in particular, folks who are just getting into their careers, you're so focused on trying to be successful yourself, that it doesn't feel like you can really focus on the common good for the larger community, right? Because it's like, let me take care of me and then I'm gonna get to it. This particular issue around education is something that I think would be an exception. If we don't get this right, your ability to, I think, live in a country that has a robust business climate and safety and security and all of that stuff is going to be deeply compromised. And if you haven't been to places where it's failed, you talk about failed states. We have failed cities here in this country where you go in them and it's just like, oh my God, how did this happen? Well, it happened because we lost our way. And part of the issue is, I think, as Stan and I are realizing our generation is exiting out, someone has to really think about this common good. And the challenge will always be the tension between, I've got to get my career together, I've got to get focused, I've got to make sure I can make it, and then I want to make sure these other things are happening. I think we can't wait the end then. I think if we don't think about both things right now, it's going to be very difficult for this next generation to be successful.
Question. Couple more. We're not going to get to all of them, but let's keep going.
Hi, my name is Shibo Zong. I'm a current junior here at USC. I study finance. My question is more for Mr. Druckenmiller. Thank you guys all for being here. And there's obviously a huge generational inequity, and it's a very timely problem. What do you see as a solution to that problem? And for aspiring businessmen and financiers like me, how can we help out?
Well, one of the answers out there that kind of bugs me, even from the so-called right wing, let's take Paul Ryan, is to exempt everybody 55 and above so that they have time to prepare. I'm not for that. I think we ought to freeze and take some sacrifice out of everybody right now. I don't care whether they're 55, 58, 85, or 90. As you can see, they've been eating a whole lot of pie. Now let's just take myself, for example. In 5 years, I'm going to start getting $3,500 a month in Social Security. Okay? Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And the $3,500 a month is going to come out of programs that be going to education, to his kids. Ridiculous. And if you think the fact that that's probably more money than I put in, and then let me give you another statistic. If you are wealthy in this country, your life expectancy is 5 more years than if you're poor or middle class. So I'm going to also collect 5 more years more than the rest of
I
society.
want my money. Sorry.
But I have told these guys, I have asked these guys in Washington, why don't you at least means test Social Security and Medicaid? Oh, once you start down that path, that's like going from marijuana to heroin. Yeah, you know. No, it's the same argument. If you smoke a joint, you're going to become a heroin addict. You know, if you means test Stan Druckenmiller's Social Security, the whole thing's going to break down and we're going to rip old people off. So that is one solution, which is you means test this stuff. But the elephant in the room is obviously medical costs. And again, this has to be worked out in the political system. This is just Stan Druckenmiller's opinion, and my expertise was already put up there to inform you of the problem, how it gets solved in the political arena. But I would just say 2 things on medical costs. Number one, malpractice malpractice reform is badly needed because it's a double killer. A, it transfers a lot of the payments that should be going into the medical system to lawyers, okay? B, it encourages a lot of tests at the hospital that don't need to be done. There's been study after study that we run 10 to 15 tests per patient in America, and we should be doing 1 or 2, and there's no efficacy whatsoever. But if you're an insurance company or you're a doctor and you run all those tests, it's a CYA policy, so you don't get sued. And the other clear thing in medical is you have got to have the patient, what I would call a customer, have skin in the game. Nobody has any idea what their medical payments are, nor do their care, because it's through this opaque system with a third-party payer. I mean, there was an article in the New York Times 2 or 3 weeks ago where a bag of saline, which cost the hospital 44 cents, by the time the patient paid for it was $590 for a 44-cent bag of saline, because by the time you get through this maze of paperwork and lab everything, because somebody else is paying for it, you don't care. I promise you, if there was no layers and you paid 30% of the bill, you would care that you paid $590 for something that paid 44 cents. So to me, you need to raise co-payments, and you need to start treating patients like customers so that they see the price and they go out and shop. Just a couple of ideas. And then this other stuff we talked about, maybe capital gains tax, cut some defense. There's a lot of things you chip away at the problem, but the big elephant in the room is obviously on the medical front.
Okay, last question, and I apologize that we have to cut them off, but they're going to stick around for a few minutes so you can meet with them. So last question over here, and thank you very much for your questions.
Hello, my name's Fabian Jimenez. I'm also a former English major from South Jersey. My question is for both of you as an educational expert and as an investing genius. We've seen the federal government kind of throw a lot more money than it has in the past at investing in higher education. And because of the way, elasticities of demand work, and a lot of that money is kind of going directly into the college, and the students aren't really seeing it in the way that we kind of want them to. How would the two of you suggest the federal government invest in higher education so that more of it gets to the people who actually need it, and less of it gets to the universities that are kind of already doing pretty well?
Mm-hmm. Well, I really can't say that I have been focused on anything except the ed schools in this country, because that happens to be the area that I'm most concerned about. And I've been really concerned that we don't know whether or not folk who are going through those schools are actually helping kids, right? So you're going to a great school, but does that translate into folk who are actually better in working with struggling students than others? And I don't think we know. So I don't think we have an accountability system in place that we actually are measuring whether or not those folk are having an impact on young people. So I think that, I'm not sure that the federal government's major role in higher ed is something that is a problem. It's not an area that I have an awful lot of expertise in.
I think both of us have focused more on K through 12, and it is astounding. We work with this professor at Harvard, Roland Fryer, on what works and what doesn't work. And interestingly, there's not a high correlation between the amount of money spent and outcomes. I think the number one outcome was on expectations, which is thus why Jeff tries to make every student have college as a goal, so they're not dumbed down with low expectations. Obviously student test scores, but on higher education, let me just say that probably the one great comparative advantage the United States has right now is our top 20 to 50 universities. There's nothing like it anywhere in the world, and these kids come from all over the world to come here and be educated. And by the way, a lot of them stay and end up being the most productive members of our society. I'm from New York. Immigrants have been 41% of our population for 50 years. But I read last week, and correct me if I'm wrong because I'm in California, I've never seen anything like this. I mean, I don't know how efficient the spending is, but apparently California spends more now on their prison system than they do on their entire educational system. And while a bunch of cuts were just made in higher education, you got an 11% increase for prison guards because of union pressure. And this is when already your state is spending more on prisons than education. I don't know about the efficiency of education system, but there's something a little wacky about that equation.
Yeah, well, go ahead, Jeff.
No, I would just say that, and this is not in response to the federal government, but I do believe that the escalating college costs are a real problem in this country, that they have been rising much higher than any other sort of measure, and it's becoming something that in many ways we may have crossed a break-even point, that the investments young people are making, they're not going to necessarily get them to pay off in a reasonable, all of us, I borrowed money to go to school, Stan borrowed money, we all borrowed money, and you knew about how long it would pay off, right? How long it would take you to pay off that debt that you had, and it was a reasonable cost. Still, there is nothing better than a college education if you're going to look for jobs in this country. But we are looking at escalating costs that may not be justified, and I think there's going to have to be some pressure to really look at this issue. That's not the question you asked, but it's an area that I'm concerned about.
Sometimes when you look under hood, this is probably where we get into different politics, Jeff. You find some unintended consequences. Part of the reason I think higher education is going up so much in price is because you have subsidization going on, and it's almost like the medical thing where a lot of the students don't feel the pain. Over half of them are on financial aid, which is a fantastic system, and I'm totally for it, but loans are subsidized to the extent, and then the student feels 10 or 15 years, they're left holding the bag. We've got all these suits going on in this country because people that were unqualified to have mortgages were given mortgages by banks. Well, I think to some extent, students have been encouraged to take out loans when the risk reward there financially wasn't there. And one of the consequences of that, it's caused artificial demand for education relative to the values. So that's part of the problem. So the people who are screaming the loudest about the education, cost of education, by wanting to subsidize it more, may actually make it an even bigger problem.